Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to this afternoon's virtual workshop session. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Francesco Corleone, who is the VP of Manufacturing Capability at COTY. Welcome, Francesco.
Hi, everybody.
Good. Francesco, as you guys can see on the screen, Francesco is going to be speaking about operational excellence and some of the digital programs that he's implemented at COTY. We were lucky enough to have Francesco join us at an Intelligent Enterprise workshop a few weeks back in London, where he spoke about some of the same topics. So we're really excited to have him join us this afternoon. As most of you know, there is a Q&A chat room at the bottom of the screen where you can post questions for Francesco to answer. Feel free to post questions at any time throughout the course of the session, and I will do my best to prompt Francesco to answer the questions. We will leave some room for Q&A towards the end, but if you have any questions along the way, then please don't hesitate to ask. But that's it from me, and Francesco, over to you.
Hi again, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. I really enjoyed to be in the conference a month ago in London. This webinar followed this conversation where we indeed did not have enough time to talk on how we integrated the operational excellence and the digital or 4.0, or call it as you want, programs. So I will share therefore with you how we did it. I collected a few slides. My intent is not to over bombard you with slides, but to get through our experience. And as Danny said, I'm very happy to take any questions anytime. So my wish is to introduce a little bit COTY to those of you who may not know us, and how we made the program work. And specifically, this is a theme where I engage conversation with a lot of people how to integrate the old traditional world of operational excellence and the new digital revolution. Let me start with my conclusion first. So I will introduce myself in a second, but fundamentally, in my experience, I realized that the traditional way to implement the operational excellence journey is a bit obsolete, and I will share with you my perspective later, and needs to evolve into something that is simpler, more agile, more practical. The digital program is very fashionable in those moments. It can't work simply without the preparation work which the operational excellence program gives, but it's what is exciting and opens CapEx, opens resources in those days. So merging the two makes a lot of sense. This is how we did it in COTY. And both programs, again, needs to work hand in hand to support each other. The third point is when you start to do that, though, and you want to really merge those organizations, you realize that people working on those two different programs have very different skill sets. So there is a leadership and staffing and succession plan part which is essential to make it work. But again, a bit of introduction. I start with myself. I'm in the industry since 27 years. The vast majority of my time with Procter & Gamble, where I spent basically most of my career implementing the TPM program merged with other P&G specific programs, which we called Integrated Work System or IWS program. I had the honor and the pleasure to lead the implementation for the beauty sector in the Europe and EMEA region. And 4 of my sites were awarded in 4 consecutive years as the best factories of the region. And I had multiple roles in TPM traditional pillar leaders across the globe as well. I think I was successful in the implementation of a capability program because I alternated my capability roles with line roles. So any kind of operation roles in plants, plant managers' experiences, and support were essential to really show how to guide capability work in both in my companies. The exceptional thing that happened to me was that I got offered to join COTY. This was almost 3 years ago. COTY was a smaller company in the beauty sector, and decided to buy the biggest part of the Procter & Gamble beauty sector that was put on sale for strategic reasons. So COTY, the little COTY company, bought the giant P&G company. It was an amazing journey. I will share how we coped to very different styles. Here I'm summarizing, I can talk only for this forever, which I want. But think about COTY as a private equity environment, fast risk-taking, P&G over-conservative and risk-adverse, especially on service and quality. For what concerned capability, definitely the two structures were on the opposite extremes, from not structure at all to over-structure. So a very, very interesting mix. About the supply chain, here I don't need to overdo, but I just want to remind what we want to do when we think about a lean value stream. I bet this is not a surprise for anybody. No, we want to have the shortest lead time, the highest quality, and the lowest cost. So back to the example, to the specificity of COTY legacy value streams were trying to be fast enough at a very, very low cost. Procter & Gamble is used to have a much higher level of service and quality and accepting a much higher cost. So a very interesting dynamic happened to us when we merged those two very different worlds. What we did then, we introduced the basic concept of end-to-end supply chain synchronization. We introduced the concept of creating flow. We worked and mapped the losses we were having through the pipe of our supply chain. We compared the two businesses. COTY and P&G had two very, very similar businesses in the luxury perfume production. And once we merged them, this made us becoming the by far market leader on the luxury fragrance industry. When we started to open our books, though, we saw that fairly similar amount of revenues and profit was achieved in very different ways, very, very different ways of managing the supply chain. And we had to become the same family, and it was an amazing journey. So the dilemma I had with my team was, how shall we leverage this situation, getting the best of both, integrating the best practices, the best cultural habits, and fundamentally having everything improving versus trying to copy-paste things working here and there. This is our story. So I will share today, for the sake of time, the part concerning the make function, so the factories, the manufacturing part. This went obviously beyond, because the revolution on our supply chain was involving everything, but we won't have time to dig in enough depth on everything. So what is this is our make mission. we have 3 pillars of activity, here represented by the 3 sentences. Make it right is about foundation. Make a difference is about making a choice on where to play. And make it happen is about on flowing the limited resources we have on the most critical projects. We can go back to any of the slides following your questions, but I won't enter into too much detail of our mission. I link that mission statement to the 3 major steps of how we want our factories to start performing. They need to earn credibility first. This is the make it right part on the foundation. So this must start with safety first, and quality and service needs to play the second strongest role. Then the site has the right to claim this is the right moment for a cost breakthrough. And eventually, the journey needs to evolve into superior responsiveness through agility. The agility definition here is not about being fast, cutting corners, etc., but being agile means that you need to be superior in responsiveness. We'll come back to this concept if time allows later. Our operational excellence journey has been built according to those 3 performance building blocks. We have a foundation part, which is about stabilizing performance. We have a stability part, which simply means, I'm trying to put our faces in the corner here, okay, so that you can read. It means that now, because you are becoming stable, you make a cost breakthrough due to reliable operation. And the agility part is something different. So superior responsiveness is enabling value creation and the business growth. I make just a parenthesis because you may have seen in the first slide this pictorial here. This is how we share the evolution of our operational excellence program. This beautiful, well, we love it, picture has been adopted as the historical logo of our program. And here in the first 2 parts, when you see it and when you prepare the ground and you water the little plant, it is when we talk about the foundation of the program. COTY symbol is a butterfly. When the little plant starts to be stable, it is when the butterflies can start to rely on the stability of the little plant. And the rest is an evolution of the little plant becoming a rock-solid tree. Who we are when we talk about factories. We had originally 16 factories grouped into 3 big divisions. This slide allows me to talk a little bit about COTY. We have a professional business. The main brands here are 2. One is Vella, which is a hair color, very old German, originally founded in Germany, pioneering company on hair treatment. And we added into this division the OPI innovative product, which is a luxury nail lacquer business, which we acquired several years ago. We have then present in the luxury sector with the fragrance business, and we have a lot of brands that you know. The best performers are by far the Gucci perfumes, the Tiffany, and the Burberry are the three top brands and fashion houses that we have. We have many, many more. And as I said, we have the market leadership in this world. We produce around 1 million bottles of perfumes per day in COTY. Then we have skincare products. Is not a big market. We have the Lancaster business, which is produced in the very exclusive Monaco factory in Monaco, in France. I bet most of you would consider funny or impossible to have a factory in Monaco. Well, we do have it. And we also have skincare luxury products sold mostly in the States under the brand of Philosophy. On consumer beauty, we have mass fragrances, a hair color for retail business, nail lacquer, and a huge cosmetic number of SKUs. The brands in consumer beauty you for sure know are Rimmel, Max Factor, Bourjois, and many others. So I stop overselling our brands because that's not the intent. Let's talk a bit about the organization. What was happening in October 1st, 2016 was that the two companies started to work together, and we needed to get rid of the Procter & Gamble systems, IT systems, now I'm specifically talking about, in a record time of 9 months, which for those of you who ever went through a TSA period after an acquisition, you know 9 months is a ridiculously short amount of time. We had to do it, we forced to do that because of tax advantages. And basically this meant that the entire supply chain had in 9 months to change entirely every systems in production, distribution, procurement, on the commercial front, etc., etc. This was a real revolution on part of the digital side of the business, and because of this compelling need, we had to deviate all our resources into that crazy effort. This was really the trigger, at least for me as a professional, to start to shift the paradigm that the OPEX team and the IT related work should be in parallel paths. It was simply not possible for us. So in my team, I had all the expertise. This was under my responsibility, and we had to rewrite the way the entire company was doing things like production execution, warehouse management, progressive maintenance. We had to cope with a very disruptive change on our master data, and we had obviously to train literally 100% of the people in our operation. There, it is when we decided again to merge the two programs. I can tell you that I would have never experienced that level of integration without having gone through this experience. In my previous experience with Procter & Gamble, I divested sites, we went through TSA, but we did it in a completely different way. What about the program? I've been asked to introduce an operational excellence program in COTY as well, coming from decades of work with Procter & Gamble, where we heavily invested on TPM, Lean, a program that is intellectual property of Procter & Gamble called High Performance Work System, which is about engaging people to the work in which is a model which is more reliable than the TPM model, at least in the Western world, was as default the option to go. This is something that you obviously find in the market. The top consulting firm in operational excellence, they all sell you what's needed to do that. But simply this wasn't possible in the COTY legacy environment. This was not an environment where I would have succeeded introducing the operational excellence program this way. So we decided to, number one, get traction from the digital challenge that I just described, and we literally distilled the essential element of the traditional operational excellence work. And we gave, we leveraged the entrepreneurial spirit that is amazingly working super well in COTY. And we set a super stretch target of saying, well, we need to go for the entire company in 3 years only through 3 different steps, which we defined: foundation, stability, and agility. I'll explain in a minute what those means in more details, but if you need to get in these slides the essence of it, you have some catchy words that will explain it. Foundation is really about engaging people under a clear direction. Stability is to train them well so that you get a very reliable operation. Agility is a different concept, which is a lot more linked to the digital journey we went through, which I will cover later. The plan started in make and now is expanding in distribution, and with our suppliers we're starting to partner the same value creation mechanism. And we have a pretty ambitious target to have bottom line savings, real money coming out of the programs of $100 million. Now, if you think for a second what I just shared with you. So we had to integrate 2 very different ways of doing work, of managing the supply chain. And we had to do it in a very compelling time because we needed to deliver to the market clearly. And we had issues, by the way, in the market. We were heavily impacting, we as a supply chain, the market. We knew it from the beginning, but we had no choice. We had to do it this way. We needed also to deliver. The analysts were expecting significant savings coming from the merger of those 2 beauty businesses. So the cost and cash targets were quite demanding. And last but not least, we were expected also to deliver a value creation plan going forward, not only short-term plans. So the dilemma was where to start, how to start a program that was engaging enough, meaningful enough for internal and external stakeholders, and more importantly, to get the traction from the entire organization. Well, we went really defining steps in according to my experience, to what I did not experience in P&G, to a very, very, very simplified model that I am trying to describe only in a few minutes. Fundamentally, the person here represented is any person working in the organization, from the operator entering in the factory in the last day, so the last arrived, up to the whoever, the plant manager. How to explain to everybody in our organization the path was something we described in this way. We obviously had a clear understanding on what plant was not performing at all and what factory was performing at the very best. Let me have a word on that. In those 16 factories, we really have extremes. So factories whose performance is quite poor compared to what you find in the beauty industry, and sites which are best in class in the industry. This is not only what Francesco thinks, but obviously I had it calibrated with the top best consulting firms, which certified, so to speak, what I said. So we have defined a good enough model which was acceptable to deliver the bare minimum with a reasonable level. And we called this a global model reference. So we created an action plan to bring the sites below, not performing at the bare minimum, to the model. That's obvious. Then we created another obvious action plan, which was still a gap versus an internal benchmark. So we have, let me make an example of the fragrance business here. We have several sites. Those sites' performance are extremely different. We have factories with line performance with an unplanned downtime which is below 5%. We have few stops per shift. We have changeover capability of minutes, and we are starting to count the changeover in seconds. For those who are not familiar with the fragrance business, having a 3D changeover and starting to count it in seconds seems a miracle to the vast majority of the industry, where you can't change over time in hours, you can't MTBF in minutes, etc., etc., etc. So when we benchmarked within our factories, the two gaps described here are very obvious. You may not get it from my poor explanation. My apologies if I'm a bit too fast here. But again, the important thing was to say to the sites at a non-satisfactory level, this is the bare minimum we want you to reach this year. And then once you can walk, you can then start to run. I'll share a maturity grid in the next slide so that it will be a little bit clearer. And I'm obviously happy to take questions on that because I'm sure there are many. Then we did not stop here. We have created some additional pool which worked extremely well for everybody. We have benchmarked in the outside world there to identify what the future center of excellence for everybody would look like. In my experience in Procter & Gamble, the one way to get best performing sites in P&G was always this. Benchmarking against the best in the industry is a must. So even if some factories are extremely good, they need to have a stretch. And when you create this stretch, something magic happens, that you start to realize that you may have some shortcuts and you may bring the worst factory directly into a complete different level. an example that I'm sure most of you heard is, which is explaining what I mean here, is to get straight from no phone to mobile phones instead of having fixed phones. This is the kind of example that I can bring with you. Now, conceptually, I bet you don't see anything that you haven't probably experienced yourself. Still, I believe there are few more comments here on this slide. This entire journey has one constraint, one most biggest one by far, which is the people skill level. The systems and tools, typically here refer to IT support, and the technology is all manageable. And in my experience, is those later two aren't a big deal. The people skills really are the constraint of the pace you can have in your continuous improvement journey. So let me give, Danny, I would go, unless you have questions collected now, I will keep going and then we open up for questions. Tell me if this is okay for you.
Yeah, absolutely. As I described, guys, in the bottom of your screen, you will have a Q&A chat room where you can post questions for Francesco to answer them. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them in there. If not, Francesco, you just continue and maybe we'll break for a Q&A towards the end, but I'll let you know if somebody types a question.
Perfect, thanks. So about all this that I overly simplified with just one slide, let me try to give you a little bit more of meat without overdoing. So this is my one pager with the distilled TPM version we used in COTY. Not too many pillars, but just 5. No, you can read yourself, those who are familiar with the TPM and Lean vocabulary won't find anything strange here. The main point here is we have 5 pillars in those 3 phases: foundation, stability, and agility. The first pillar is about setting the direction for everybody. The second pillar, the loss, is to quantify what is the magnitude of loss, the gap in terms of business results against the direction, the end results where you need to go. The third pillar is about how to engage effectively 100% of the people to get rid of each loss to get to the direction. And then we grouped the toolbox, including the traditional AM, PM, FI, and etc., into 2 very different ways compared to my experience. One, we call one pillar rigor, which is all about improvement for the base business, for what is not changing. A startup pillar, which is concerning all the changes. And with change, I don't mean an initiative only. Any change concern will go into that pillar. Again, I can talk about this slide forever, but that's not the intent. I give you another one pager for our maturity grid. So maybe I have in the call black belt assessor of every kind of maturity grid in the industry. In the challenge I had in my assignment here was both to have to make it practical and not overdo with expectations in terms of maturity grid. So we defined those 6 steps in principle in a simple way. Okay, the bottom part Where you are red in foundation, it simply means that you are not in control. You get a feel on where we were. That could be an interesting detail. On June 2017, 3 sites were pretty much out of control in their performance and with high risk of business disruption linked to all the changes we were talking about. Again, we changed entirely the way to operate in our factories. You started to be out of the red when you fundamentally had pilots explaining you how to get out of trouble, but still not rolled out to the entire operation. So this is where the vast majority of the sites pretty much were. And then you start to have some stability when you are in this 2.2 area here with better solid foundation. Here it is when really the engagement of the people start to make the difference. But you are not stable, meaning you cannot give to the company breakthrough in cost and cash, which eventually is happening over time. The situation evolved, and it evolved pretty fast. What is the difference, again, in this assessment versus an assessment which is more traditional when you do a TPM assessment? It's a lot more hardwired with results than what I experienced in Procter & Gamble. Even in Procter & Gamble, we upgraded significantly the program versus what we were doing 15, 20 years ago, where we were assessing the site only on systems implementation. Now Procter & Gamble has a lot more modern program where performance comes at first. But here we really stretched performance at first. This was essential for me to get traction from an organization that wasn't really eager, convinced, committed to any of those programs. I bet there will be questions here, but I let the questions to come at the end. Was this enough? No, this wasn't really enough. I was getting not sufficient traction when people started to be around here, around the two, when the two parts over last year, basically, started to be greener. Even the most advanced sites were starting to plateauing in their expectation and performance. And that was when I needed help, outside help, to get to show a higher level of opportunity and a bigger gap against new indicators, new performance indicators at all levels. This would include the supply chain officer himself. So we tested one model, which is the one I presented in London together with the startup called Smarter Chain. They helped us introducing an index called Factory of the Future Readiness Index. Basically, I will explain what this is in my last few slides. But just to give you a feel on what it meant to us, our best performing site, which is a benchmark in the industry in fragrance, allow a little bit of arrogance here. I personally consider this site the best performing factory in fragrance in the world, and they are extremely aggressive in setting new objectives. But a company arrived and told them, hey, you are good enough, but you are not better than a 50% score. And this score is linked to cost and cash opportunity. It's not just a score which is just talking about capability in isolation. Again, every assessment in capability needs to be hardwired to what is the business opportunity. Otherwise, at least in COTY, you don't get any traction. What is the comparison to one site that is representing the low end of our performance? Well, you see yourself the comparison with the best and the worst. A plant being at that level of performance, like the bottom part of the graph, is not in the condition to start really a digital transformation. You will see here there are 4 buckets. In the next slides you will see. And basically you need to first go and fix the first 2, which are fairly low here, 13 versus 25 and 6 against 22. The maximum for those buckets is 33 though. So you cannot get more than 33% here, more than 33% here, etc., etc. And the target for Cologne to be aggressively in line with their renewed mission, which is a very aggressive reduction of their conversion cost by 50%. So again, the best factory in COTY and probably in the industry, going after a 50% of conversion cost reduction is huge, is enormous. They were not committing to that. Once we did the exercise with this indicator and the other toolkit of this company, they were all buying into this program. What is this indicator about? This is an animation. I won't cover this in breadth and depth. This is again, Dani, what we saw with Gustavo Lopez in London. Basically, you have an integrated assessment on where your organization is. When you have an organization which is pretty mature, it makes sense to do this exercise. If the organization is really red in the maturity grid I just shared, it's not appropriate to go there. You basically lose time. But when you start to get out of the big red spot, especially on foundation, it is extremely interesting to start evolving the work here. And the capability work and the linkage between digital and OPEX here starts to take shape very nicely, because the skill set of the OPEX team starts to go beyond the traditional OPEX implementation and goes more broader on the digital arena. Let me give you another perspective on how those index work. So basically level 1 is all about infrastructure. Do you have the infrastructure to claim you are ready for digital, yes or no? The number 2 is about integration and automation. So are the technologies capable for automating tasks, and is there a connection between systems? And this isn't really yet about continuous improving. The digital journey starts when you really have integration and automation, yes, but you leverage the data, you don't waste data. We realized in Corona we were wasting 95% of our data, and we were not leveraging them for continuous improvement, which is now the plan. It's not yet the case, it's the plan. And we hosted obviously workshop and understood better how to drive the work. And eventually the plan to get, I would say 50% of our losses elimination is to get to level 3. And then this factory of the future readiness index gives us also an interesting benchmark in all the dimensions with the outside world. And again, when you are talking of best-in-class factories, you within your house, your company, you need to have external benchmarking. Otherwise, your organization will not raise the bar. So I'm looking at my watch, Dani. I just plan to be here exactly in 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Okay. I have a few more slides, but I definitely would check if we have some questions before
Sure.
closing.
Sure. No, great. Really interesting presentation up until now, Francesco. So thank you very much. For the members on the other side of the session, please, if you have any questions, fire away. It's nice to have a quick break for Q&A. So in the bottom of the screen, you'll see several tabs. If you open up the Q&A chat room, that will allow you to type questions, and Francesco can answer them live whilst we have him here online. So does anyone have any questions at this moment? Okay, Francesco. Yeah, if you've got a couple of more slides, maybe you can begin to just move forward with those, and
Yes.
if we
close. Yes.
yeah, exactly. Thank you.
No problem. So basically, all those information enabled us to build. If you remember the slide with the person at the bottom of the step going up, we have built the last level of gap against the external benchmark with all the information that I very quickly bombarded you with this final roadmap. This roadmap is, again, we don't have time to explain that in any breadth and depth, but this is about a plan of our best performing site, rebuilt after we identified the gaps with this factory of the future index. The factory I'm talking about is a factory I'm coaching since 12 years. They, every 3 years, went through a cycle of cutting by half their conversion cost, which, if you think about it, it's crazy, okay? Because the vast majority of the organization think this is not possible. This is the 4th time they're planning to do though. So this is obviously a continuous cycle that will go forever if you can stretch yourself against a reference. And in the case of this Cologne site, this time was extremely difficult. So this roadmap, as I was saying at the beginning, is also used by sites which are totally far away from this level. They are completely at the very beginning of the journey. Well, their roadmap, though, doesn't need to be as long as the one of the Cologne site, and we are estimated that we can halve the time that Cologne needed to get there for even the worst site, which is with us. So I hope this conversation was entertaining. Through Danny, I'm available for taking maybe some calls if time does not allow Daniel now. No problem. We can have an email exchange. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Yeah, I know a few of the attendees wasn't able to join for the entire session, hence they may have missed the Q&A part towards the end. The session is recorded and will go out to our entire network, so people will have an opportunity to watch this back at a later stage. If anyone has any direct questions for me, I will of course communicate that with you, and if you guys are happy to take that up in a slightly different time, then that would be great. But Whilst we have the last few minutes of the session scheduled, if anyone has any questions. Okay, so we have a question, Francesco, from Anne Michelle from Intertech. Can you see that?
I can try.
Yeah, if you open up the, you should have a notification.
Yes, yes, I see that. Were all the sites on the same technology base at the start, Cologne and Ashford, for example? No, no, definitely not. Anne, Michelle, hi. Thanks for your question, by the way. The technology level of the two sites is very different. And that's normal. That's normal, and it's it was a choice. No, the Ashford site is a COTY legacy site. The Cologne site went through several integrations. And in Ashford, we try to start up lines more complex than the ones Ashford was used to have. So I'm building a bit on your question here. So we brought lines of the level of complexity coming from another P&G factory, and we got confirmation of the obvious. So when the people skill set isn't ready, you simply cannot run those lines decently. So it's cheaper today in Ashford to run, and I'm used as an example of technology a line, because a production line is everything in a factory, but this concept is for everything. It's for the use of SAP, it's for the use of any systems and technology. Today, we are cheaper, we are better in using cheaper, slower, easier lines than the most advanced lines. Obviously, if you use an advanced line that goes 5 times faster than the ones they are using, the productivity will fly, but it's not possible. Constraint number 1, people capability. Hope I answered to your question. You're welcome.
Any more questions for Francesco while we are live on the session?
Doesn't seem to be the case.
No. Okay. Well, Francesco, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's been great having you on here. Really interesting presentation from you. As I discussed, the session has been recorded, so we will send this out to our network at a later date. And of course, if anyone has any direct questions for you or would like to engage with you on the topic, I will facilitate that introduction. But apart from that, thanks again, Francesco, and we hope to see you again soon.
It was my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.